But Jarrod's definition of quality,
Little different than everybody else's.
just be selective.
Oh, wait, I'll be selective. I'm always selective.
No, you're
But
not.
we have to buy.
I'm going all in on this one.
I need a straight jacket and a muzzle.
My Halloween costume.
I found some spooky items in the unit.
That creeps me out.
Jarrod Schulz once had millions of people watching him every week. Today, he serves drinks at a bar in Lake Forest, California, far removed from the reality television fame that made him a household name. Most people think they already know how his story ended. A bitter breakup, a domestic violence charge, and a public fall from grace, while Brandi Passante moved on. But that version leaves out the most important question. What happens when a man loses the person who helped make him famous in the first place? And why, years later, does he still seem unable to erase the evidence that she was ever part of his life? Join us as we uncover what Jarrod Schulz lost. Before she found him, he was already lost. The year was 1997, and Jarrod Schulz was 20 years old with nothing to show for it except a criminal record and a judge who had run out of patience. The first arrest came on January 27th of that year, methamphetamine possession, a charge that earned him 2 months in county jail and a strict probation that most people in his position would have treated as a lifeline. Jarrod did not. Within 1 week of walking free, he was arrested again, this time with more drugs in his possession and a DUI charge layered on top of it. The same judge looked at the same young man standing in the same courtroom and handed down 16 months in state prison without hesitation. What happened inside those 16 months is something Jarrod has rarely spoken about in detail. But the people who knew him then have described it as the kind of reckoning that either destroys a man or quietly rebuilds him. He walked out of that prison in the late 1990s, recalibrated, not reformed in any dramatic sense, but aware, maybe for the first time, that second chances were not guaranteed to come in threes. He landed a job as a sales manager at a carpet cleaning company in Tustin, California. Not the life he had imagined, but honest work. He showed up every day to a job that asked nothing of him except reliability, which was the one thing he was slowly learning to give. And then the new hire walked in. Brandi Passante was 19 years old when she started at that carpet cleaning company, and by every account, she was not looking for a love story any more than Jarrod was. She was sharp, no nonsense, and completely unbothered by the fact that her new workplace was full of men who underestimated her. Jarrod, who was her supervisor in all but title, noticed her immediately, not because she made herself noticeable, but because she was the kind of person who walked into a room full of men who had already decided what she was and quietly proved every one of them wrong before lunch. They began dating not long after. There was no dramatic declaration, no single defining moment that either of them had ever pointed to and said that was when everything changed. She did not rescue him in the way that stories like to frame it. She simply existed in his life consistently, and for a man who had spent years making himself impossible to count on, that consistency became everything. There were no cameras and no audience. Brandi was already the anchor Jarrod had been drifting without for years, and he would spend the next 2 decades failing to understand that before it was too late. The producers who eventually came knocking were looking for Jarrod. What they found when they arrived changed everything, and it had nothing to do with storage lockers. The woman the cameras weren't supposed to find. By 2010, Jarrod and Brandi had been together for 11 years, had 2 children, and were running a thrift store in Orange County called Now and Then, a business that blurred every line between work and relationship until it was impossible to say where one ended and the other began. The producers came for Jarrod. They left with Brandi. An aunt who worked at a storage facility had pointed him toward the auctions he had started attending, and the crew arrived expecting to film a scrappy young bidder with good instincts and a thrift store to his name. What they found instead was the woman behind the register, and the two of them together, bickering and finishing each other's sentences, doing naturally what most reality shows spend entire budgets trying to fake. Both of them were in, and when the show premiered on A&E in December 2010, the audience did not simply like them. They recognized them, not as television personalities, as people they already knew. By Season 2, one episode pulled 5.1 million viewers, the highest rated in A&E history at the time, and the two people most responsible were a couple from Orange County who had stumbled into the whole thing by accident. There was something in the bickering, in the eye rolls, in the way Brandi could communicate pure exasperation with a single look while Jarrod bulldozed ahead on instinct, that felt unmistakably real. Because it was. They were not performing for the camera. They were doing exactly what they had been doing for a decade, and viewers who had spent years watching reality television immediately felt the difference. What those viewers could not have known is that what looked like dysfunction was actually fluency. The arguments were not signs of a couple falling apart. They were the language of two people who no longer needed to perform for each other. Jarrod would overbid on a unit, and Brandi would let him know with the economy of someone who has said the same thing 100 times before. She carried the skepticism. He carried the risk. By 2014, the network gave them their own spin-off. They had never been legally married. They had been together for 15 years, built 2 businesses, raised 2 children, survived more than most married couples ever face, but had never signed a document that would have made any of it official. The show ran for 8 episodes before it was canceled, and the title, in retrospect, reads less like a premise and more like a clue. The job was the marriage, and when the job eventually ended, the absence of that legal foundation would mean there was nothing formal left to divide, only the wreckage of an informal life that had been built entirely around her. What was happening behind the bickering and the cameras was something the audience never got to see, because Brandi had gotten very good at carrying weight that was never meant to be hers alone. What does it look like when a woman slowly disappears inside a life she helped build? And how long does it take before the man standing beside her notices she is already gone? What the cameras never stayed to film. The school pickups were always Brandi. The bedtime routines were always Brandi's. The logistics of 2 children, a household, 2 thrift stores, and a filming schedule that never stopped. All of it, primarily, Brandi. Not because Jarrod was absent in the dramatic sense, but because he was there the way some men are there, intensely, periodically, and in ways that never quite reached the unglamorous daily work of it. What made this harder to see from the outside was that Brandi was not the kind of person who performed her suffering. She showed up. She kept bidding, kept filming, kept running the household, kept being the steadying force in a life that was quietly asking too much of her. In a 2021 interview, speaking publicly about her life after the split for the first time in any real depth, she said she had not been allowed to have an identity for many years, and was only then beginning to understand who she was outside of him. Jarrod loved his family, the way some men love the idea of a thing rather than the daily practice of it. He may have simply never understood what caring looked like in the hours when there were no cameras, no auctions, and the only thing being asked of him was to show up for the people who needed him most. By the end of filming Season 12 in 2018, Brandi had made a decision, not in one sudden moment, not because of a single event, but because 19 years of gradual imbalance had finally reached the point where she understood that waiting for things to change was its own kind of loss. she ended it the way she had carried everything else. They kept it private for 2 years. They kept showing up to the same set, standing near each other at the same auctions, letting millions of viewers believe in a partnership that had already ended. The cameras never knew. The crew never said. And every episode that aired during those 2 years was a broadcast of something that had already quietly died, watched by millions who had no idea they were seeing a ghost. What Jarrod was feeling during those 2 silent years, standing beside a woman who had already decided, pretending for the cameras that nothing had changed, is something he has never once discussed publicly. But silence has a way of filling up. And when it finally broke, it did not break with words. It broke in a bar in Orange County on a night that would make every door that was still open slam permanently shut. So what exactly happened that night? And why did it end, not with a statement, but with a single word tattooed on a woman's finger? The night the silence finally broke. April 30th, 2021, started as an ordinary night. Brandi was at a bar in Orange County with friends, the kind of easy evening the last 3 years had made possible. And then Jarrod walked in. What followed, according to the accounts that were later reported to law enforcement, was a confrontation that escalated past the point of a difficult conversation. The two began arguing, and when Brandi told Jarrod to leave, he did not. There was a push, allegedly twice, and yelling directed at Brandi and the friends around her. By the time police arrived at the bar, Jarrod was gone. Officers took a report, tracked him down days later for a statement, and heard him say that he had never laid a hand on her. The Orange County District Attorney's Office reviewed the evidence and came to a different conclusion. 1 count of misdemeanor domestic violence battery was filed against him. A&E launched an investigation, and when Season 14 of Storage Wars premiered later that year, Jarrod Schulz was not in it. A&E never issued a statement explaining his absence. The cameras simply continued rolling, and the silence from the network was as complete as the silence from Jarrod himself. But Brandi was not silent. In October 2021, she shared a photograph on social media of a tattoo on her middle finger, a single word, rendered in small dark ink, with a tiny bird taking flight off the final letter. The word was free. The caption she wrote alongside it did not mention Jarrod's name. It did not need to. She wrote that the tattoo meant she had managed, by some grace she was still grateful for, to escape a very difficult situation, one that too many people never escape. She thanked the people who had supported her. And then, with precision that felt entirely intentional, she ended the post with a hashtag that left nothing ambiguous: National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This was a woman who had spent 20 years choosing her words carefully. This time, she had chosen just one. Jarrod denied the incident to police and has never publicly addressed it since. Whether the charge was ultimately resolved has never been confirmed. What was confirmed, permanently, was the image of a woman who tattooed the word "free" on her own hand and meant every letter. So what does a man do with himself in the years after a moment like that? And what does the life he builds in that silence say about the thing he has never been willing to admit? The bar at the end of everything. The Rush Bar and Grill sits on El Toro Road in Lake Forest, California. Sports on the televisions, live music on weekends, a Facebook page full of event promotions from a man who used to be on A&E and now posts about St. Patrick's Day specials. Jarrod bought it in April 2019, a few months after the split that the public did not yet know had happened. The Now and Then stores had closed. The clothing brand domain had been redirected to a GoDaddy sales page, and his social media had gone silent since 2022. The show was on season 16 without him. And the woman he had moved on with, Rochelle Beckman, a bartender at the Rush who had been in his life since around 2019, was now the face in his profile picture, while Brandi's photographs stayed untouched in the gallery beneath it. Rochelle's own social media had included a line that many fans read as a direct commentary on what she had replaced. She had written that it was remarkable how much happier life could be when someone was appreciated the way they deserved. Jarrod appeared happy in the photographs they took together, and yet the life around him, the bar, the quietness, the social media he had abandoned, looked less like a man who had moved on, and more like a man who had simply stopped moving. Then, in February 2025, Jarrod posted on Facebook that it was time for Storage Wars on A&E to ask him back for the new season. He wrote that it just was not the same without him. The network did not respond. The show kept filming. The comment section had opinions. A&E had none. But the detail that says the most is not the Facebook post. It is what he has never done. Jarrod has not deleted his photographs with Brandi. The profile picture is of Rochelle. The gallery still has Brandi in it. For a man who barely posts, who has retreated from almost every public platform, who runs a neighborhood bar and lives as quietly as a person with his history can manage, he has held on to those images. He has not finished with that chapter in the way the chapter has finished with him. Brandi, meanwhile, turned 45 in May 2025. Her boyfriend posted birthday messages that read like someone paying close attention to who she actually was. Her children were adults now. Her son had just turned 22, her daughter 20. She was on season 16 of Storage Wars, still bidding, still winning, still the reason any room she walked into had a center. The show Jarrod wanted back was hers now, in every way that mattered. And somewhere on El Toro Road, behind a bar he built after she left, a man who has never quite said what he means is still serving drinks to people who no longer know his name. Does a man who has moved on leave the photographs in place? Or is an archive no one asked him to keep the most honest thing Jarrod Schulz has ever said? What he never said and never deleted. Jarrod Schulz has never given an interview in which he described Brandi as the great love of his life. He has never made any public declaration about what she meant to him. Not during the relationship, not after it ended, not once. This is not a story that ends with a confession into a camera. It ends in what he did not say and did not delete. What the record actually shows is this. Every business of lasting value that Jarrod ever built, he built either with Brandi or because of her. The thrift store was hers as much as his. The television career came through her presence at the register the day the producers arrived. The spin-off existed because the two of them together were more compelling than either was alone. Strip Brandi out of the Jarrod Schulz story, and what remains is a man with a bar in Lake Forest, a clothing brand domain for sale on GoDaddy, and a Facebook page full of posts that add up to nothing. And the photograph gallery he has not cleared is the third entry on that record. There is a particular kind of admission that men who are not good with words make through their behavior rather than their language. They ask to come back to a show that moved on without them. They build a bar in the same city where she goes on living her life, and they serve drinks every night under television screens that occasionally play footage of the two of them younger, louder, and full of a future neither of them knew how to keep. Jarrod Schulz has not said that Brandi Passante is the only love of his life. Some men say what they feel. Some men leave the photographs where they are and call it not getting around to it. Somewhere on El Toro Road tonight, a former television star is behind a bar that a woman he has never stopped loving does not visit anymore. The show she is still on is probably playing on one of his screens. And in the phone in his pocket, if you scrolled back far enough, you would find her. Still there, still saved. Still exactly where he left her. Is it love when it only becomes visible through loss? Or is that just grief that never found a better name? And here is the one that is harder to answer. If Brandi had stayed, would Jarrod have spent his whole life never knowing what he actually had? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.